صل على محمد وآل محمد.
إن له لحافظون. We reveal the remembrance, يعني Al-Quran Al-Kareem, and we shall protect it. The preservation of Al-Quran Al-Kareem, our book, the book of Islam, the book which is often recited by the Muslims, the most recited book in the entire world, the Holy Quran. Its preservation and protection, Allah Almighty Himself took the responsibility of. The previous heavenly books that were revealed, which we believe in, Allah left its preservation and protection to its people and their leaders. So they would tamper with the Talmud and with the Torah and with other books as well. And part of that tampering was that there is passages supposedly written that the promised land shall be returned to the promised people, the chosen people. And where does that land extend? From the Mediterranean Sea to the river Euphrates in Iraq. Hence why the bigger objective of the Zionist movement is to establish Greater Israel. And in order for them to get there, they must eradicate whoever is in their way. They must begin to normalize relationships with countries that are surrounding them. And that's what we're seeing. Every day, every month, every year is a step closer to their ideology, their movement, their vision of a greater Israel. When did it begin? I'll go from 1898, when a gentleman by the name of Theodor Herzl, he established the Zionist movement, and he held the first ever Zionist Congress and conference in Austria, in which like-minded Zionists who wanted a state for the Jewish people who were being oppressed and tortured and obliterated and had been throughout history, that we need to find a place for them where they can go and they can seek refuge, and then they can take over and they can be, they can claim that we have our own land, knowing full well that Allah Almighty dismissed them. Allah Almighty casted them out of the Holy Land. They were unable to enter into Al-Ard al-Muqaddasa, into Jerusalem, because of their many violations, because of their many transgressions. Allah Almighty removed them. They said, you shall remain wandering on this land until the end of time. But they believe in the coming of the Messiah. That Messiah that they believe in is whom? Al-Masih Dajjal, the Antichrist. We believe in the return of the Messiah as well. But the Messiah who we refer to is Al-Masih ibn Maryam. Sayyidina Isa, the Prophet Jesus, peace be upon him. He shall return back onto this earth and kill the Dajjal. But they are in anticipation and awaiting for the arrival of the Dajjal. And everything that is happening now, is being done now, is all in preparation for his arrival, the coming of the Messiah, which they interpret as the Dajjal. Therefore, after 1898, the first Zionist Congress, Theodor Herzl, the founder of the modern Zionist movement, they established, made their intentions very clear, and with the backing of very, very, very wealthy families, a name which we may prop up on our TikToks, the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, these prominent, very wealthy and influential families. The founder of the Rothschild, this individual had sons which he spread into France, Germany, the United Kingdom, and they established banks. By the establishing of these banks, they started wars, knowing that the countries that they would invade, the Zionist movement would go and infiltrate. Through this, they will be able to make those countries in debt and then offer them money with interest, and then for the rest of the time of the existence of those countries would be slaves to the movement. slaves to the agenda. So it began. World War I. How did it start? What was the reasoning? What was the motive behind it? And then we see that there's another name. When you study Zionism, his name is Chaim Weizmann. I won't say wise man, because he's not a wise man. He's Weizmann. Chaim Weizmann, this individual, he spent a lot of time. He spent a lot of time influencing in the political sphere. Politicians, men who were in positions of authority and influence, in order to establish this ideology and movement, that it is accepted within the world of politics. So he became very good friends with a man called Arthur Balfour. Mr. Arthur Balfour, who was an MP from East Manchester, this individual who became the foreign minister of the United Kingdom's government, the conservative government at the time. Mr. Balfour, along with Mr. Weizmann, these individuals conspired, sat together, and because their demand was what? Weizmann was a man, an individual. During World War I, he created an explosive, which he would sell to the Allied armies, the Allied countries, the Allies, and said, here you go, use them. So he was able to influence them through the bombs that he would make, the explosives. They took him very seriously, and then he asked in return, because he joined the Zionist movement in the Congress, from the second Congress, the second meeting that they held. At that moment in time when Mr. Weizmann joined this, believed in the Zionist movement, he went and influenced through World War I, and then the British government asked him, what would you like? And what did he say? That I want a state for my people, that the Jews have a homeland. They said, at this moment in time, we can offer you Uganda, British Uganda, go there and establish your state. And they said, no, we've been promised the return to the Holy Land. And if there's any land that we desire and want, it is Al-Ardul Muqaddasa, the land of Palestine. From that moment onwards, from 1970, the Balfour Declaration, all the way up to 1947-48, after World War I, when the Ottoman Empire was abolished and collapsed, and the Arab countries revolted, etc., and you will study this history and you'll know. Thereafter, the British, when they appointed the Sharif family, Hussain ibn Sharif or Hussain ibn Ali al-Sharif, this individual, along with his brothers, that they would become the kings of Jordan, the kings of the kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the kings of Iraq. The British mandate distributed and divided the Arab world to the respective countries. So Transjordan was made, and thereafter Iraq and Saudi Arabia, etc. But there was one land that they hadn't delegated where it would go, and that was what? Palestine. Palestine remained where it was. So they said that the British would come into Palestine from after the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, from 1918, 1919, around this time, all the way to 1947, the British would rule over Palestine. And they would permit the entry of Jewish people from Europe and other parts of the world to come and reside in Palestine. It is during this time there were many uprisings. There was much resistance done by the great scholars of that time. The likes of Sayyidina Izzuddin ibn al-Qassam, rahmatullahi ta'ala alayhi. The face of the Palestinian resistance in the early 1920s. He went and he asked for a fatwa from all the great ulama of that time, especially as Shaykh al-Islam, Sayyidina Badruddin al-Hassani, rahmatullahi alayhi, of Syria. And when they passed the fatwa that now we must do jihad to defend our land, then ulama joined in, whether it was from Syria, whether it was Lebanon, whether it was Jordan, all this Levant region, Bilad al-Sham, some of the greatest mujahideen were the greatest alims on the ummah, within the ummah of the world at that moment in time. So they fought resistance. They had every right to defend their land. Because slowly now, the powers that be, that were ruling the world, they were allowing the indigenous people to be removed. So there were droves of Jewish people who were beginning to enter into the Holy Land. And then in 1947, at that moment in time, when the British realized that there are too many uprisings in the Arab region and is unable to handle, the United Nations was formed after World War II. And at that moment in time, what happened? They established. So the League of Nations became the United Nations, the UN that we see today. And then the UN, they took over certain territories. One of the territories was what? Pakistan was established, Kashmir, along with this, Palestine. So they said to them, well, what are we going to do? So the UN passed a resolution that the state of Israel will be established. In 1947, the state of Israel was established. The first president of the state of Israel was who? Chaim Weizmann. The same individual who for 30, 40 years has been doing a lot of work underground to establish the Zionist movement. This individual was named as the first president or prime minister of Israel. In 1948, a catastrophe took place, which is known as the Nakba. 750,000 Palestinian people were displaced, were removed from the land of Palestine. There was a huge Holocaust that took place against the Palestinian people. They had every intention to eradicate. And that's why this state is, or Zionism certainly is, a racist, settler colonial movement. The intention is for this entire land to just be for Jewish people and none but the Jewish people. No Arabs, no other people of other ethnicities can live on this land. And since then till now, 47 and then 48, the Nakba, 750,000 people, 750,000, they were killed, murdered, they were expelled from their homes, their land was taken, robbed, stolen, and then we find many of those who were robbed of their lands and their homes and were displaced, becoming refugees. Where did they go? To an area which is referred to as Palestinian territory called Gaza. In the West Bank, Gaza, Jordan, Syria. There are over 6 million Palestinian refugees worldwide. 6 million Palestinian refugees worldwide. You know what that means? They don't live in Palestine, but they were born in Palestine. Their father, grandfather, great-grandfather was expelled from there. They were kicked out of their own land, and now they've gone and sought refuge in other countries. This is an oppression which has been happening for decades and is happening before our very eyes. And what do we do about it? Why is there this deafening silence in the world? Knowing what's happening in Palestine, innocent people are being killed. After 48, in 67, Jerusalem was taken over, and then we see thereafter the Nakba, the 67 Six-Day War between the Arab countries, Egypt, and other countries like Lebanon, all joined in with the Arabs to have a 6-day war with the Palestinians, with the state of Israel, the IDF, and we see the consequences. What were 280 to 325,000 Palestinians and 100,000 Syrians fled and were expelled from the West Bank in 67. And then in 87 to 91 we had the first Intifada. And then sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, حلف الفضول قبل إعلان النبوة, before the announcement of prophethood, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam joined a movement. They joined a movement which stood up for social rights. The rights of women, the rights of children that were being oppressed and injustice was done on them in Makkah Mukarramah. They joined the three Fadls, the brothers. They joined this movement, and after, when they went to Medina Munawwara, they would fondly remember the manifesto of this movement, the objectives. But Allah Almighty gave the world something better than this, which was Al-Quran Kareem, which was Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and which was the religion of Islam. Allah Jalla wa Ala said, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu ku, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, O you who believe, be with those who stand for justice. Stand against oppression, stand against it. You see wrong, speak against it. You see wrong, stand against it. The silence that you do when you remain silent, then you are part of it. Don't remain silent. Keep boycotting and keep doing everything. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He grant freedom to the Palestinian people. That Allah Almighty grant them the rights that they deserve. That He allows us to support them in every way, shape and form until our last breaths. وأقول قولي هذا أستغفر الله لي ولكم.